Latinos in Texas, a district that's 97% Latino, went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border.
It's
the border
misogyny.
crisis is on their doorstep. And they were begging people to care about it for years. We need to take some lessons.
That's what that was.
The lessons are not
Knock,
misogyny,
knock.
sexism.
Who's there? Oh my gosh, it's Whoopi.
So liberals out there are trying to figure out how in the world did Donald Trump become the 47th president of the United States of America? What went wrong? Was it their messaging? Why did so many black people, Hispanics, women, union workers, these people normally vote Democrat? Why did so many of them go for Donald Trump? I decided to go on a couple of liberal broadcasts like The View to hear basically what people are talking about. In this particular excerpt, this is a back and forth discourse between Sunny Hostin and Alyssa Griffin. Both of them are co-hosts with this program called The View. Let's take a listen to what they were talking about. Here it is.
Do you think that in this post-mortem that needs to happen with Democrats, they need to think about why wasn't she given more lead time? Why didn't Biden give her 6 months or a year to run? But there's bigger pictures. That's a micro. There are some macro issues here. The fact that the nation elected somebody like Donald Trump, who even people who voted for him, I talked to so many of these people, will say, I don't like him. I don't like the things he says, but I felt like my life was better under him. I think that a lot of Democrats missed the moment. They were looking at the micro and not the macro.
Do you think the Republicans missed the moment? What about a post-mortem on the Republican Party, which is the Trump Party right now?
They just swept, though. I mean, I've been talking about what I'd like to see from the Republican Party.
They won, but they're morally bankrupt.
Well, it doesn't look like Sunny Hostin was getting what her co-host, Alyssa Griffin, was trying to tell her. I mean, basically, her co-host, Alyssa Griffin, is telling her what the exit polls, what they were showing. And all an exit poll is someone walking up to you saying, hey, who did you vote for? Why did you vote for them? What were your issues? And they just take this data back and they just give it to the news outlets like CNBC and CNN and Fox News so that people can have a better understanding of what really happened and what took place. You can tell from Sunny Hostin's body language that she just wasn't feeling it. She didn't believe it. I mean, maybe she believed strongly that the abortion messaging would get out to women and that no woman would vote for Donald Trump based off of that very, very hot issue. But, I think what a lot of Democrats fail to understand is that, yes, some women are thinking about abortion, but almost every person can relate to this. When they go to the grocery store and the groceries are higher than they were like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a lot less expensive when Donald Trump was president, a lot of people can relate to that. Well, not everyone. I mean, there are some rich people, some elites, they don't have to think about the cost of groceries or the cost of gas because they got it like that. They're making a lot of money. Maybe Sunny Hostin makes over $100,000 a year, and she didn't think that this would be like a big issue. She really thought that abortion would be the number one issue that women would vote for Kamala Harris. The next day, they invited Stephen A. Smith, a renowned sports commentator, very popular guy. He votes Democratic. I mean, he even said he voted for Kamala Harris. But hear what he had to say to the panel of The View. Let's hear it.
I go back to what you said about black men being very comfortable with matriarchy. And I agree with that because, black households are often led by a grandmother, black grandmother or black mother. However, 55% of Latino men voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think that economically, they were looking at things. First of all, in this country, you've got Cubans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, Venezuelans, Colombians, et cetera, et cetera. And if you talk to the Hispanic community, depending on who you're talking to, they think differently. The Cubans think differently than the Dominicans. The Dominicans think different than Colombians. To some, the economy was a priority. To some, believe it or not, it was the border. You had some folks within the Hispanic populace that were encouraging the borders to be closed.
They want to pull the.
But here's why that's so imperative. It's so important. Because we're not Latinos. They're telling you that's what we want. Yeah. We had to stay online. We had to be online in order to get in. Who are you to bypass the line? And one of my friends, I remember he used this analogy, and I never forget this as long as I live. He said, you like Six Flags, you go to Great Adventures? I said, I have. He said, sure. Disney World? Sure, I have. Of course I have. He said, so you stand in line, Take about 2 hours to get on some of these rides because they're that popular. He said, and right before it's time for you to get on that line, somebody jumped in front of you. What you gonna do? And he said that kind of mentality is how you have folks within the Latino, within the Hispanic community, some of them, not all, but some of them who view immigration that way. So again, when you think about the economics, when you think about immigration, those two things are what I have found has influenced the Hispanic vote one way or the other.
Stephen A. Smith, I mean, he is sounding like a pollster. You know, those people that go out into the streets and they ask who you're going to vote for, what are your issues, what's important to you, and then they take a little survey and they get it back to, you know, either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and they're supposed to read that information and say, hey, the hot topic amongst people is this or that. And it just seemed like Stephen A. Smith basically hit all these different areas and topics. I was hearing the same thing when I was out there interviewing people in the city of Chicago for my podcast, Zero Ambiguity. They were telling me, the people that I interviewed, and I interviewed people that were Hispanic, African Americans, different backgrounds, economic backgrounds, and they were basically telling me that the reason why they were going to vote for Donald Trump is because of the economy, because of their finances. The second reason was because of the border crisis. The third reason was because they didn't feel like Kamala Harris was going to do anything different than she's done before, because she was connected to Joe Biden, you know, by her being the vice president. They were like, what is she going to do different, and why hadn't she already done it? So those were the three main reasons that kept coming up as I were interviewing people in the city of Chicago. So I don't know who in the world the Democrats were polling. I mean, they said that this election was going to be tight, 50-50 within a margin of error of 3 points, and that it would possibly even drag out, you know, 3 or 4 days after the polls closed. Well, in fact, it actually was decided, as you all know, within the first 3 or 4 hours of the election, and Trump won by a landslide. So I don't know who in the world the Democratic Party were polling. I mean, were they polling people from college, universities? But they certainly didn't poll people that were in the ghetto, the hood. They didn't poll the people that I talked to in the city of Chicago. I don't know who they polled. I mean, where were they getting their information and facts from? Well, maybe this will be a lesson, and maybe they'll do something different for the 2028 election. Well, Stephen A. Smith has some more things to say, so let's listen to what he had to say.
The other important thing to recognize is this, and I've said this often. When we look at the economy, I remember when Biden came into the office, he inherited about 1.5% inflation. It ballooned to about 9.1% before it ultimately came down to where it is now, right? That doesn't mean anything to minorities. The percentage of inflation, and here's the percentage. Nah. How much does gas cost? How much does the groceries cost, okay? How much does rent cost? How much does my mortgage cost? That's what folks pay attention to, what's actually in their wallet.
What do you think? I mean, were you thinking the same thing that Stephen A. Smith was saying? I mean, he's basically echoing the same things that Alyssa Griffin said, that a lot of people out there saying that you were saying. I mean, this is why so many people voted for Donald Trump. He basically echoed the same things that, you know, so many American people were trying to tell the Democratic Party many, many years ago. What do you think? I mean, were these some of your concerns? Were you thinking the same things? Go ahead and leave your comment in the comment section. I appreciate those who comment. And at this point, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the 8 new subscribers that have recently subscribed to my YouTube channel, Zero Ambiguity. Now we're up to 309 subscribers since I started this podcast about a month ago. I appreciate all of those who come to this particular platform and view the material and comment. Also, I want to let you all know that even if you don't subscribe, I appreciate the views. That helps me a lot. So anyway, thank you for taking the time to view this podcast once again, and I appreciate you all out there. I'll see you all again. Thanks.